My son and my best friend of 30 years put me in a cage for a crime that never existed. They told the world, I killed 3 patients. I didn't. While I rotted behind bars, they stole my company, abandoned my wife to die alone in a nursing home, and split $200 million between them. But dead men don't stay buried. And neither did I. With the edge of my thumbnail, rough and split from 729 days of concrete living, I carved another line into the wall beside my cot. The motion had become something between prayer and promise. A ritual I performed every night before the fluorescent lights buzzed off and left me in the gray half-dark of Federal Medical Center Devons. 729. Tomorrow would make 730. Tomorrow I would walk out of this place and back into a world that had forgotten me. I sat on the thin mattress and let the silence settle. November in Massachusetts meant the cold crept through the walls like something alive. It found the cracks in the concrete, the gaps around the window frame, the hollow spaces in your chest where warmth used to live. I pulled the wool blanket tighter around my shoulders. It smelled like industrial detergent and other men's despair. Before this place, I slept beside Catherine in our brownstone on Beacon Hill. Egyptian cotton sheets, the faint scent of her lavender lotion, her breathing soft and steady beside me. Before this nightmare, I was Walter Drummond, co-founder of Drummond Pierce Medical Technologies, a company I built from a garage laboratory in 1983 into a $200 million enterprise that put life-saving devices into hospitals across 47 states. Now I was inmate number 04719. A number. A ghost. A man the world believed had murdered 3 patients through negligence and greed. But ghosts can be patient. And patience, I had learned, is the most dangerous weapon a man can carry. The memories came uninvited, the way they always did when the block went quiet. The courtroom. Judge Robert Henley sitting behind his mahogany bench with that practiced expression of moral authority, an expression I now knew cost exactly $200,000. And there on the witness stand, not my son, no, that would have been bearable. There stood Victor Pierce, my partner, my co-founder, my best friend since graduate school at MIT, 41 years of shared history, and he sat there in his charcoal Tom Ford suit and delivered my death sentence with the composure of a man ordering lunch. I loved Walter like a brother. Victor's voice had been perfectly calibrated, warm enough to seem genuine, broken enough to seem grieved. I never thought he was capable of this kind of negligence. When I discovered the falsified safety reports, the unauthorized modifications to the cardiac devices, I was devastated. 3 people died because my partner chose profit over patience. Lies. Every syllable constructed with the precision of a Swiss watch. Victor had always been meticulous. I used to admire that about him. Funny how the qualities you admire in a friend become the qualities that destroy you when that friend becomes your enemy. Then Marcus had taken the stand. My son, 40 years old, broad-shouldered, wearing the suit I bought him for his 35th birthday. He would not meet my eyes. Not once during his entire testimony. He spoke to the jury, to the judge, to the gallery, but never to me. My father has been under tremendous stress since my mother's diagnosis. His voice had carried that rehearsed quality I recognized from childhood, the voice he used when lying about broken vases and stolen cookies, only refined now, polished by years of corporate presentations. I noticed irregularities in the safety protocols months before the incidents. I reported them to Victor. We tried to intervene, but Dad was the primary signatory. He had final approval on all device certifications. I had watched my son weave the noose that hanged me, and I had sat there in that courtroom unable to do anything but watch. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on 3 counts of negligent homicide. Guilty on 2 counts of fraud. The gavel fell, and my world collapsed into a single sound. Metal. On wood. Final as a coffin nail. I stood now and walked to the small steel mirror bolted above the sink. The man who stared back was not the man who entered this place 729 days ago. My hair had gone fully silver. My face had lost its softness. Cheekbones sharp now. Jaw defined by rage rather than good living. I had dropped 30 pounds. Not from the food, though the food certainly helped. From the furnace burning inside me that consumed everything soft and left only iron. My eyes were what changed most. Catherine used to say I had kind eyes, warm eyes. The eyes looking back at me now held nothing warm. They were patient and cold and calculating. The eyes of a man who had spent 2 years turning pain into architecture, building something inside himself, brick by careful brick, that would outlast his captivity. Thomas Griffith spoke from behind me. His cot creaked as he shifted. "You're doing that thing again, Walter. Staring at yourself like you're memorizing a stranger." I allowed myself a thin smile. "Maybe I am a stranger, Thomas." Thomas was 55, silver-haired, lean, with the quiet intensity of a man who had spent his career investigating healthcare fraud for the Office of Inspector General before being framed by the very system he served. 3 years into a 5-year sentence for a crime manufactured by a pharmaceutical company he had been investigating. We understood each other, Thomas and I. Two men caged for the sin of being inconvenient. Tomorrow, you walk free. Thomas folded his reading glasses carefully. "What's the first thing you'll do?" I turned from the mirror. "Visit my wife." Thomas nodded slowly. "And then I'm going to burn Victor Pierce's world to the ground." Thomas said nothing. He just looked at me with those investigator's eyes, and what I saw there was not judgment. It was recognition. One wronged man acknowledging another. Outside, the November wind threw itself against the walls of Federal Medical Center Devons. Inside, I lay down on my cot for the last time and stared at 729 marks on the wall. Tomorrow, mark 730, would not be carved in concrete. It would be carved in Victor Pierce's life. And unlike my marks, his would not wash away. The expensive shoes always gave them away. In a place where everyone shuffled in rubber-soled institutional footwear, the sharp click of Italian leather on linoleum announced wealth the way a trumpet announced royalty. I could hear Victor Pierce coming from 3 corridors away. That precise, unhurried rhythm. A man who had never rushed anywhere in his life because the world always waited for him. The guard gripped my elbow and walked me to the visitation room. Same fluorescent buzzing overhead. Same bolted table. Same plexiglass divider that separated the caged from the free. They seated me and fastened the wrist restraints to the table ring. Standard protocol for inmates within 48 hours of release. As though I might suddenly decide that 2 more days was too long to wait. The door on the other side opened. Victor entered first. Of course he did. Victor always entered first. 60 years old, and carrying himself like a man of 40, silver hair swept back, clean-shaven. A charcoal Tom Ford suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary. His tie was burgundy silk. His cufflinks were platinum. Everything about him announced control. Marcus followed. My son looked like what he was. A 40-year-old man trapped between 2 forces stronger than himself. His suit was expensive, but wrinkled at the elbows. His tie was loosened a half-inch. He carried a leather portfolio under one arm and would not look at me. He had not looked at me once in 729 days. They sat across the plexiglass. Victor picked up the phone receiver first, gestured for Marcus to do the same. A choreography between puppet master and puppet so practiced it appeared natural. "Walter." Victor's voice came through the receiver, smooth as aged bourbon. "You're looking well, all things considered." I said nothing. Just watched. 2 years of silence had taught me that words were ammunition, and ammunition should never be wasted. Victor smiled. That particular smile I had seen 1,000 times across boardroom tables, across dinner tables, across 30 years of what I once believed was genuine friendship. We need to discuss the IPO, Walter. The underwriters require your biometric authorization as co-founder. Fingerprint and retinal scan. Without it, the offering is delayed indefinitely. I remained still. Marcus cleared his throat. Dad, it's just a formality. The company's doing well. The IPO will benefit everyone. You'll receive your share once everything is processed. My share. $200 million built from my research, my patents, my sleepless decades in laboratories. And my son spoke about my share as though he were offering table scraps to a dog. Sign the authorization, Victor said. His voice remained pleasant, but underneath I heard the blade. Tomorrow you walk out with nothing. No accounts, no access, no home. Without this IPO, there's no liquidity to restore your position. Sign, and we'll make sure you're taken care of. Taken care of. The phrase men use when they mean controlled. I lifted the phone receiver to my mouth and spoke my first words to them. No. Victor's expression did not change. Not a flicker. 30 years of friendship had taught me his tells, but Victor's control was nearly perfect. Nearly. The only sign was a fractional tightening at the corners of his mouth, a compression so small anyone else would miss it. I did not miss it. Walter, be reasonable. Victor leaned forward slightly. Think about Catherine. The name landed like a slap. She's at Sunrise Senior Living. Victor continued his voice, dropping to something almost intimate. Lovely facility. Private room. Round-the-clock care. That beautiful garden she enjoys. Very expensive, Walter. $23,000 a month. Currently paid from the company's executive care fund. He paused, letting the implication settle. Without the IPO, without company liquidity, that fund dries up. Catherine would need to be transferred to a Medicaid facility. He tilted his head slightly. Have you seen a Medicaid nursing home, Walter? Shared rooms. Overworked staff. Patients left in hallways for hours. My hands clenched under the table. The restraints bit into my wrists. But I welcomed the pain. It kept the fury contained. It kept me from smashing through plexiglass with my bare hands and wrapping the phone cord around Victor Pierce's throat. Is that what you want for her? Victor pressed. Your wife, confused and frightened, moved to some understaffed facility where no one knows her name? Where she calls out for you and no one comes. Dad, just sign it. Marcus's voice cracked. Please. It doesn't have to be like this. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. The sweat at his temple. The way his right knee bounced beneath the table. The desperation in his eyes that could be mistaken for concern, but was actually fear. Not fear for me. Fear of Victor. Fear of what happened when Victor Pierce did not get what he wanted. No, I said again. Silence. Victor studied me the way a chess player studies a board. Calculating. Reassessing. Marcus stood abruptly. Dad, come on. Mom needs that facility. You're being selfish. You owe us this much after what you did. What I did. The accusation hung in the recycled air between us. What I did, according to the official record, was approve faulty cardiac devices that killed 3 patients. What I actually did was discover that Victor was falsifying safety reports and preparing to confront him. That confrontation never happened because they put me here first. Marcus left the room. His footsteps echoed down the hallway, fast and uneven, running from something, though he probably did not understand what. Victor did not stand. He watched my son leave, then turned back to me with something different in his face now. Something the cameras mounted in the ceiling corners could not capture through plexiglass. Something meant only for me. You know, Walter. His voice dropped so low, I had to press the receiver hard against my ear. I've been patient. 30 years patient. You had everything I ever wanted. The company was mine to build. The reputation was mine to earn. But Catherine, he paused. His mask slipped for 1 second. Underneath was not coldness. It was hunger. A raw, ancient want. that had festered for decades. You should have shared her, Walter. 30 years I waited. 30 years watching you come home to her. Watching her choose you every single day. Now I'm taking everything else instead. The company, your son, your freedom, everything you built. Because you took the only thing I ever truly wanted. The plexiglass between us might as well have been tissue paper. I could feel the heat of his confession, the weight of it. 30 years. Not business, not greed, not even ambition. Love. Twisted, poisoned, patient love that had rotted into something monstrous. Victor hung up the phone. He stood, buttoned his jacket with precise fingers, and walked out without looking back. The door closed with that familiar, hollow sound. The guard came to unlock my restraints. I sat motionless, staring at the empty chair where my best friend had just revealed the architecture of my destruction. 25 years. He had waited 25 years since Catherine rejected him. Built his revenge brick by brick, year by year, smile by smile. Every dinner at our home, every Christmas, every birthday. Every time he held Marcus as a baby, stood as Marcus's godfather, mentored my son through adolescence. All of it preparation, all of it poison. Slow dripped into the foundation of my family. The rage in my chest did not burn. For the first time in 730 days, it froze. Became something crystalline and sharp and infinitely more dangerous than fire. Because now I knew why. And a man who knows why can destroy anything. November air in Massachusetts does not greet you. It assaults you. After 730 days of recycled prison oxygen, filtered through vents caked with decades of institutional dust, that assault felt like resurrection. I stood on the other side of the Sallyport gate and filled my lungs until they ached. Cold. Clean. Tasting of fallen oak leaves and distant wood smoke and freedom. The guard who processed my release had done it with the same bureaucratic indifference he probably brought to his morning coffee. Sign here, initial there. Here are your personal effects. A manila envelope containing my wedding ring, $63 in cash, and a photograph of Catherine taken on our 40th anniversary. She was laughing in that picture. Eyes bright. Mind whole. That woman no longer existed, and the man who loved her had spent 2 years in a concrete box while she faded alone. I slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit loosely now. 30 pounds lighter meant 30 pounds less of everything, including the flesh that once filled a wedding band. The outer gate buzzed and slid open on its track. Beyond it stretched the visitors' parking lot, gray asphalt under gray November sky, surrounded by bare birch trees whose white trunks looked like bones. And there at the center of it all stood Marcus. My son had brought cameras. 3 news vans lined the far edge of the lot, satellite dishes already extended. Reporters clustered behind a rope line, breath fogging in the cold. Marcus himself stood beside a black Mercedes, holding an absurd bouquet of white lilies. He wore his navy overcoat, the one Catherine had given him 3 Christmases ago, and his face was arranged in an expression of practiced grief and rehearsed relief. "Dad." He stepped forward as I cleared the gate. His voice projected, angled toward the cameras. "Welcome home. We have missed you so much. We are just so glad this is finally over." I kept walking. My eyes fixed straight ahead. Past Marcus, past the Mercedes, past the performance he had constructed for public consumption. My stride did not slow. My expression did not change. "Dad, wait." Marcus moved into my path, flowers thrust forward. "Let me take you home. We can talk. We can figure this out as a family. Family." The word tasted like ash. I walked around him the way you walk around a signpost. An obstacle. Something fixed in the ground, with no capacity to follow. "Dad." His voice sharpened, dropped low enough that the microphones could not catch it. "Get in the car. Victor says we need to talk. There's still time to fix this." I stopped. Not because he told me to, but because I wanted him to see my face when I spoke. I turned slowly and looked at my son, at the sweat beading on his forehead despite the November cold, at the way his hands trembled around those ridiculous lily stems, at the boy I had raised, the man I had lost, the stranger who stood before me wearing my last name like a stolen coat. "You had 730 days to fix this," I said. My voice was quiet, steady, cold enough to frost glass. "You chose not to. There is nothing left to fix." I turned and kept walking. Behind me, I heard a reporter call out, "Mr. Drummond, how does it feel to be free? Mr. Drummond, any comment on the charges? Will you seek to overturn your conviction?" I said nothing, just walked. And then I saw it. A black Lincoln Navigator pulled into the lot from the service entrance, moving with quiet authority. Dark, tinted windows. Recent model. The kind of vehicle that announced competence rather than extravagance. It stopped directly in my path, positioned perfectly between me and the press line. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Mid-50s. Olive complexion. Dark hair, silvering at the temples. He wore a charcoal suit beneath a wool overcoat, and he moved with the contained energy of someone accustomed to courtrooms and confrontation. His face was familiar. A face from the before time, from when I still had a life. "Mr. Drummond." Raymond Costa extended his hand. His grip was firm and warm against the November chill. "It has been far too long, sir." Raymond. My throat tightened. Raymond Costa. My personal attorney for 18 years before Victor had orchestrated his temporary disbarment on fabricated ethics charges. Another piece of the machinery built to isolate me, to strip me of every ally before the trap closed. "I had you disbarred," I said. "Or rather, they did." Raymond's jaw tightened. "Reinstated 11 months ago. Full hearing. All charges dropped. Turns out, fabricated complaints don't hold up well when the fabricator's other crimes start surfacing." He opened the rear passenger door. The interior was warm. Heated leather. The faint scent of good coffee from a travel mug in the cup holder. "Your daughter is waiting," Raymond said. "She has been very busy." I looked back one last time. Marcus stood frozen beside his Mercedes, bouquet hanging at his side, petals already dropping in the wind. His face cycled through confusion into something darker. He pulled out his phone and dialed with shaking fingers. I knew who he was calling. The puppet reporting back to the puppet master. Through the tinted glass, I watched my son grow smaller as we pulled away. He looked like what he was. A man standing in an empty parking lot holding dead flowers, realizing for the first time that his strings might not hold. Raymond navigated onto Interstate 93 south toward Boston. The road unspooled before us, gray and wet, lined with bare November trees. After 2 years of concrete walls and a 6x9 cell, the openness of the highway felt almost overwhelming. The sky stretched in every direction. The horizon existed. I had forgotten what horizons looked like. "Your daughter," Raymond said, checking his mirror. "She has been very busy for 18 months. Since approximately 6 months after your incarceration, she has been building a case." I processed this slowly. 18 months. 6 months of silence first. 6 months when no one came. When I thought everyone, even Nadia, had abandoned me, left me to rot as the world moved on without the inconvenient old man. "What changed?" I asked. At 6 months, Raymond's expression shifted. Something between admiration and sorrow. She was working a shift at Mass General. Routine paperwork. Pulled up a patient file for a transfer case, and the name hit her. "Samuel Okafor, one of the 3 patients you supposedly killed." I went still. The file was flagged as deceased, but the hospital system showed an insurance claim submitted 4 months after his supposed death. Someone was still billing under his patient number. "Your daughter, being your daughter," pulled the thread. "And what did she find?" Raymond glanced at me in the mirror. His eyes held something I had not seen directed at me in over 2 years. Hope. She found that Dr. Samuel Okafor is alive, living in Maine under an assumed name. Victor Pierce paid him $500,000 to disappear and let the world believe your negligence killed him. The trees blurred past the window. The highway hummed beneath us. And inside my chest, something that had been locked away for 730 days began to unfold. Not rage, not grief. Something quieter and infinitely more powerful. "How busy?" I asked as my daughter. Raymond smiled. The first genuine smile I had seen in 2 years. Busy enough to terrify Victor Pierce. And he does not even know it yet. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a brick building in Cambridge, 2 blocks from the Charles River. Raymond knocked twice, paused, then knocked once more. A code. My daughter had a code for her own front door. It opened, and there was Nadia, 29 years old, standing in the doorway wearing scrubs from an overnight shift, dark hair pulled back, shadows beneath her eyes that spoke of months rather than hours of lost sleep. She looked like Catherine at that age. The same sharp intelligence, the same jaw set against something breaking. For 3 seconds, we just looked at each other. Then she broke. Her face crumpled, and she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me, with a force that nearly staggered me. I felt her shoulders shake, felt tears soaking through my thin release shirt. "Dad." Her voice muffled against my shoulder. "I am so sorry. For 6 months I believed them. 6 months I did not visit, did not call. I thought you were a murderer, and I just left you alone." I held her, said nothing. Some moments do not require words. She pulled back, wiping her face with the heel of her hand. A gesture so familiar it ached. The same motion at 8 years old, after falling off her bicycle. At 15, when a boy broke her heart. "You are here now," I said. "That is what matters." She nodded, rebuilt herself breath by breath, and stepped aside. What I saw made me stop in the doorway. Every wall surface had been transformed. Photographs pinned with colored tacks, documents highlighted in yellow and pink, red string connecting names to dates to bank accounts. A massive timeline stretched across the living room wall, running from 2 years ago to the present. The dining table held no plates. Only manila folders labeled in Nadia's precise handwriting. A laptop showed multiple browser tabs. Financial databases, court records, corporate filings. My daughter had turned her apartment into an investigation headquarters. Nadia shifted into presentation mode. Precise. Logical. The way she presented medical cases during residency. 6 months after your conviction. She pointed to a red star on the timeline. Routine transfer paperwork at Mass General. A patient named Samuel Okafor came up flagged, deceased. But there was an insurance claim filed under his number 4 months after his supposed death. Dead men do not file insurance claims. She pulled a photograph from the wall. Surveillance image, slightly grainy but unmistakable. A man leaving a small medical clinic in Camden, Maine. Coffee in hand. Alive. Victor Pierce paid him $500,000 to disappear. Wire transfer routed through 3 shell companies. I traced every hop. Raymond stepped forward. This morning at 8, we filed emergency motions to freeze all Drummond Pierce corporate accounts. Every operating account, every executive fund, frozen, pending investigation. "What about Catherine?" I asked. "If the executive care fund is frozen, already handled." Nadia pulled a document. "I established a private trust 9 months ago. Anonymous funding. Catherine's care is secured for 5 years, regardless of what happens to the company." My daughter, 29 years old, working 100-hour weeks as a resident while simultaneously running a covert investigation, securing her mother's care, coordinating with a reinstated lawyer, and tracking a dead man across state lines. All while I counted marks on a wall. "How did you fund this?" "Sold my condo. Moved here." She gestured at the small apartment. "Second mortgage on the property Mom left me." "And Claire Whitfield, investigative reporter at the Globe, helped with resources. She is ready to publish the moment we say go. Raymond's phone buzzed. He checked it. Marcus attempted executive expense accounts 12 minutes later. Also denied. Good, I said. Let him feel what nothing means. Nadia moved to the far end of the timeline where red strings converged, like arteries leading to a heart. Her voice changed. Quieter. Heavier. Dad. The two other patients. Elizabeth Hartwell and James Nguyen. They are genuinely dead. I nodded. But the device failures that killed them occurred on October 15th and November 2nd. You were arrested October 1st. You were already in custody when those devices malfunctioned. The implications settled through me like ice water. Someone tampered with those devices after you were in prison, Nadia said. Someone with hospital access and technical knowledge to introduce a defect that would look like manufacturing negligence. Victor, I whispered, he did not just frame you for 3 deaths. Nadia's eyes met mine, steady despite the tremor in her hands. He caused 2 of them. Murdered 2 people to make the frame convincing. Real bodies. Real victims. Real grief for the jury. The room went silent. 2 years I had believed this was about theft. About greed. About a man taking my company and my freedom. But Victor Pierce had killed 2 innocent people simply to ensure the cage he built for me would hold. This is not white-collar crime anymore, Raymond said quietly. If we prove device tampering, this is homicide. Nadia straightened. Then we prove it. We have Okafor alive. We have the financial trail. And we have something Victor does not know we have. What? Time. She smiled for the first time. A smile so much like Catherine's that my chest ached. He thinks you walked out today with nothing. No money. No allies. No plan. He does not know about any of this. And by the time he does, it will be far too late. I would learn the details of that evening later. From news reports. From Marcus's confession. From security footage. Subpoenaed during discovery. But I will tell it as it happened. Because understanding Victor Pierce requires seeing him when the ground shifts beneath his feet. The annual MedTech Innovation Gala at the Four Seasons Hotel Boston was Victor's kingdom. 300 guests in black tie, champagne towers catching candlelight. Conversations about billion-dollar valuations conducted over Wagyu and truffle risotto. Victor had chaired this event for 11 years. His name on the program, his face on the banner, his handshake opening every door in that ballroom. He arrived at 7:15. Charcoal tuxedo, custom fitted. The smile of a man who believed himself untouchable. Marcus walked 2 steps behind, wearing the nervous energy of someone who had been trying to reach his lawyer all afternoon and failing. Victor worked the room. Handshakes with hospital administrators. Knowing nods to FDA regulators. A warm embrace with MedStar Dynamics CEO, whom Victor was privately courting for a merger. Every interaction calibrated. Every word, a chess move. The charity auction began at 9. Marcus bid on a signed photograph. $50,000. Reflex. Habit. The kind of spending you do when money has never been a question. Credit card, Mr. Drummond. Marcus handed over the corporate American Express. Black card. No limit. The assistant returned 40 seconds later. Apologetic. Leaning close. I am sorry, sir. This card has been declined. Marcus blinked. Run it again. We have, sir, 3 times. He pulled his personal visa. Try this. Another 40 seconds. Another return. This one as well, sir. The ballroom became a fishbowl. Marcus stood too quickly. Bourbon sloshed. He walked toward the lobby. Phone pressed to his ear. Michael Chen, their CFO, answered on the second ring. Voice tight. Controlled the way people get when delivering catastrophic news. Everything is frozen, Marcus. Every account. Corporate, personal, operating. Emergency freeze order filed this morning by your father as majority shareholder through Raymond Costa. That is not possible. Costa was disbarred, reinstated 11 months ago. Marcus. The freeze references forensic audit, SEC involvement, criminal referral language. This is serious. Marcus leaned against the lobby wall, vision narrowing. And then Victor appeared, unhurried, jacket buttoned, not a hair displaced. Victor read his face in one glance, guided him into a service hallway, away from ears. The accounts, Marcus whispered. All frozen. Dad filed through Costa. Victor's expression did not change. Not a flicker. That supernatural control. He studied Marcus the way a surgeon studies a scan. Calm down. His voice was level, almost bored. Your father is a 72-year-old man who just left prison. He has one lawyer, and whatever cash was in his pocket this morning. This is a nuisance. Not a crisis. But the SEC, there is no evidence because there is no crime. Victor straightened Marcus's tie with paternal familiarity. Go home. Sleep. I will handle this. Marcus left. Victor watched him go. And then, alone in that service hallway with champagne laughter filtering through walls, Victor Pierce's mask slipped, not dramatically, just a fractional tightening of his jaw. His right hand closed into a fist, knuckles whitening for 3 seconds. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number from memory, never saved in contacts. The call connected. Victor spoke in a voice I had never heard him use in 30 years. Low. Urgent. Stripped of performance. Activate the Zurich transfers. All 3. Tonight. He ended the call. Straightened his cuffs. Rebuilt the mask in the space of a breath. Walked back into the ballroom. Collected his coat. Said gracious goodbyes to 3 separate groups. Exited into November night. That night, between 11:45 and 12:30, 3 wire transfers totaling $45 million moved from Drummond Pierce corporate accounts to a numbered account in Zurich, Switzerland. The transfers had been pre-authorized weeks earlier. Dormant. Waiting for exactly this contingency. This is what separated Victor from ordinary criminals. Ordinary criminals panic. When caught, they scramble. They make mistakes, born of desperation. Victor Pierce had prepared for this moment the way he prepared for everything. Methodically. Years in advance. With contingencies built upon contingencies. He had stolen $45 million in the space of 45 minutes. Not because he was panicking, because his exit strategy had always included this step. A trap door built into the architecture of his betrayal, waiting to be opened the moment the floor began to shake. We did not discover those transfers until 2 days later. By then, the money had moved twice more. Zurich to Liechtenstein to a trust in Singapore, whose beneficial ownership was buried under 7 layers of corporate shell. $45 million. Gone. But Victor made one mistake that night. One single error, born not of panic but of arrogance. He assumed the freeze was all we had. He assumed Walter Drummond had walked out of prison with nothing but a reinstated lawyer and a grudge. He assumed the nuisance could be managed. The crisis contained. He did not know about Nadia's war room. Did not know about Dr. Okafor alive in Maine. Did not know about Claire Whitfield's 14 months of investigative reporting ready to publish. Did not know that his puppet had already begun to feel the strings. And he certainly did not know that in 48 hours, the entire country would learn that one of his murder victims was still breathing. Victor Pierce was not panicking. He was executing. But he was executing a plan built for a world that no longer existed. A world where Walter Drummond had no allies. No evidence. No daughter with a wall full of red string and a fury to match her father's. That world died the moment I walked out of Federal Medical Center Devons. Victor just did not know it yet. Claire Whitfield's article hit the Boston Globe's website at 6 in the morning on a Tuesday. By noon, it had 14 million views. By evening, the hashtag #DeadManWalking was trending in all 50 states. And my name was on the lips of every news anchor in the country. The headline was surgical. The dead patient who is not dead. How a medical executive faked 3 deaths to frame his own partner. Beneath it, Claire had laid out 18 months of investigation in prose, so precise it read like a prosecutor's closing argument. Photographs, bank records, corporate filings, and at the center of it all, a surveillance image of Dr. Samuel Okafor walking out of a medical clinic in Camden, Maine. Alive, healthy, very much not dead. Okafor had given Claire an interview, recorded on video, his face visible, his voice clear, his words devastating. Victor Pierce contacted me through an intermediary in August 2 years ago. Okafor's voice carried the weight of a man unburdening a conscience he had carried too long. He offered $500,000 to disappear. New identity. New state. All I had to do was let the world believe I was dead. He told me it was a corporate restructuring issue, that my death certificate was needed for an insurance claim. I did not ask enough questions. I took the money. I am ashamed of that. The interviewer asked the obvious question. Did Walter Drummond have any involvement in your disappearance? None. Okafor shook his head firmly. I never met Walter Drummond. Never spoke to him. Victor Pierce arranged everything personally. The article detonated across social media like a bomb dropped into still water. The ripples spread in every direction simultaneously. Comment sections overflowed. Television producers scrambled. Legal analysts appeared on morning shows dissecting the implications. If one victim is alive, a former federal prosecutor told CNN, then the entire conviction is built on fabricated evidence. This is not just wrongful imprisonment. This is a conspiracy of extraordinary scope. I watched from Nadia's apartment, refreshing the article's comment section not for vanity but for temperature. The public's rage was useful. Rage created pressure. Pressure created mistakes. And mistakes were what we needed Victor to make. But Victor made no mistakes. Not publicly. Not visibly. That was what troubled me. Marcus, by contrast, was drowning. I would later learn that he woke that Tuesday morning to 63 missed calls and over 100 text messages. Reporters camped outside his temporary apartment. His photograph appeared on every news broadcast beside the word co-conspirator. His name was in the article, not as a source, not as a witness, as a participant. Co-conspirator Marcus Drummond authorized the wire transfer to Okafor's Shell account on October 3rd, per internal email documentation obtained by the Globe. Marcus called Victor 17 times that day. Every call went to voicemail. He drove to Victor's penthouse on Commonwealth Avenue. The doorman informed him that Mr. Pierce had terminated his lease 4 days earlier. Forwarding address. None. He tried Victor's office at Drummond Pierce headquarters. The receptionist said, Mr. Pierce had not been in since Friday. His personal effects had been removed over the weekend. Victor Pierce had vanished. Not fled. Not hidden. Vanished. With the quiet efficiency of a man who had planned his exit long before anyone knew he needed one. Marcus called me that evening. I let it ring to voicemail. His voice was raw, ragged. Dad, please. Have you seen the article? They are saying I authorized transfers. I did not know what Victor was doing. You have to believe me. Please call me back. Please. I did not call him back. Not yet. Marcus's panic was useful too, but in a different way. A desperate man with no allies eventually turns to the only people who might still help him. I needed Marcus desperate enough to confess, desperate enough to turn on the man who had controlled him for 25 years. That required patience. That required letting him sit in his fear until it became unbearable. Nadia stood at her wall, updating the timeline. moving pins, extending strings. She worked with the focused intensity of a surgeon in an operating room. "Victor is too quiet," she said without turning around. "I know. He has not released a statement. Has not contacted legal counsel that we can identify. Has not responded to the Globe's request for comment. Nothing." "I know," I said again. She turned. Her face held the expression I recognized from my own mirror. Controlled concern, overlaying something colder. "Dad, this man killed 2 people to frame you. He spent 30 years pretending to be your friend while planning your destruction. And now he has disappeared with $45 million and complete silence. That is not the behavior of someone who has given up." "No," I agreed. "It is the behavior of someone reloading." "What do? We wait. We continue building. The trial is set for January. Either Victor runs permanently, in which case Interpol and the FBI will find him eventually, or he stays and fights, in which case he walks into a courtroom where a dead man will be sitting in the witness chair." "And if he does something else?" Nadia asked. "Something we have not anticipated? Then we adapt." "But Nadia, I need you to understand something about Victor. I have known him for 41 years. He does not improvise. He does not panic. Everything he does is planned months or years in advance. His disappearance is not spontaneous. It is the next phase of a strategy he designed long before this morning's article. That does not comfort me. It should. Plans are predictable. Panic is not. I would rather face a man with a plan than a man with nothing to lose." Nadia considered this, then turned back to her wall. Her fingers traced the red string that connected Victor's name to the Zurich account, to the shell companies, to the numbered trust in Singapore. $45 million, she said quietly. That is his retirement fund. His escape hatch. He thinks he can disappear with it and live out his life somewhere without extradition. Perhaps, but he has not left the country. Nadia pulled a pin and repositioned it. His passport was flagged yesterday. FBI border alert. If he tries to leave through any official channel, they will know. So he is still here. He is still here, she confirmed. Somewhere in this city or close to it. Watching. Waiting. Deciding. I looked at the wall. At 30 years of friendship mapped in photographs and financial records and red string. At the architecture of a betrayal so patient, so meticulous, that even now I could almost admire its construction. Victor Pierce had not panicked, had not run, had simply gone silent. And in that silence, I heard something more dangerous than threats, or bluster, or desperation. I heard a man thinking. A man with $45 million, no conscience, and nothing left to protect except his own freedom. The next move was his. And that terrified me more than anything else. Because Victor Pierce never ran from a fight. He simply chose the battlefield. The nurses at Sunrise Senior Living said Catherine had not spoken a coherent sentence in 3 months. They said it gently, the way medical professionals deliver information they know will wound. Preparing me, lowering expectations, making sure I understood that the woman behind that door was not entirely the woman I married 43 years ago. I understood. I had understood since the diagnosis 4 years earlier. When the neurologist showed us the scans and Catherine squeezed my hand and said, "Well, Walter, I suppose we will have to make the memories we have left count." She had been brave that day. Braver than me. The facility was beautiful. I had to give Nadia credit for that. Despite everything, despite the financial chaos and the frozen accounts and the war being waged in shadows, my daughter had ensured her mother lived in warmth and dignity. Private room. Fresh flowers on the windowsill, changed twice weekly. Photographs on every surface, faces from a life Catherine was slowly forgetting. Soft music, playing from a small speaker. Debussy, Catherine's favorite. I stood in the doorway and looked at my wife. She sat in an armchair by the window, wrapped in a cream cardigan I did not recognize. Someone had brushed her silver hair and pinned it back with a tortoiseshell clip she had owned for decades. She was thinner than I remembered. Smaller. As though the disease was not just erasing her mind but diminishing her physical presence in the world. Shrinking her back toward some beginning I could not follow her to. Her eyes were on the window. Watching nothing. Or watching everything. With Alzheimer's. You never knew which. I crossed the room and sat in the chair beside her. Close enough to touch. I did not speak immediately. Just sat with her in the quiet, letting her adjust to another presence in her space. The way you approach a wild bird. Slowly. Without demand. After a long moment, I took her hand. Her fingers were cool and thin. They curled around mine with a pressure that might have been reflex or might have been recognition. I chose to believe recognition. "Catherine," I said softly. "It is me. It is Walter. Nothing." Her eyes remained on the window. A cardinal landed on the bird feeder outside, red against November gray. Catherine's gaze tracked it with mild interest. I kept talking. Not because I expected response, but because silence between us had never been our way. "Do you remember the fall we met? Harvard Medical Conference. 1981. You were presenting on cardiac tissue regeneration. I was in the third row. You wore a green dress and you spoke for 45 minutes, and I did not hear a single word because I was too busy trying to figure out how to introduce myself to the most brilliant woman I had ever seen." Catherine's hand twitched in mine. A slight increase in pressure. I continued. "You told me later that my opening line was the worst you had ever heard. I said something about your research methodology being elegant. You said elegance was for ballrooms, and asked if I had an actual question, or was just wasting your time." Something shifted in her face. Subtle. A softening around the eyes. The faintest upward curve at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile. A ghost of one. A memory of what smiling felt like. I talked for 20 minutes. About our first apartment in Somerville. About the night Nadia was born, and I fainted in the delivery room. About Marcus's first steps. About the company launch in our garage, Catherine soldering circuit boards while I wrote grant applications. About 43 years of building something together. And then Catherine turned her head. Looked directly at me. And her eyes were clear. Not the unfocused gaze I had seen through plexiglass during the few prison visits the disease allowed. Not the vacant pleasantness the nurses described. Clear. Present. Catherine. Walter. My name in her voice. Undamaged. Whole. Like finding a perfect photograph in a burned house. "Yes," I managed. "I am here." Her hand tightened around mine with surprising strength. Her brow furrowed slightly, the way it did when she was concentrating on a complex problem. Assembling something from scattered pieces. "Victor," she said. My breath stopped. Victor came to me. Her voice was thin, but steady, deliberate, as though she knew this window of clarity would not last, and was determined to use every second of it. 25 years ago. In my office at the hospital. He said he had loved me since MIT, since before you. Said you did not deserve me. Said he could give me more. Catherine. I leaned forward, my heart hammering. I told him no. Her eyes held mine with fierce intensity. I told him I loved you, that I chose you, that I would always choose you. He stood there, and his face, Walter, his face changed. Something died in it and something else took its place. Something cold. What did he say? He said, "I will take everything from him. Someday. Everything he has that should have been mine." She blinked rapidly. "I should have told you. I thought he was being dramatic. I thought he would move past it. He was your friend, your partner. I did not want to destroy that." Tears tracked down her face. Slow. Silent. "I am sorry," she whispered. I kept his secret, and he used those years. All those years of smiling, at our dinner table, holding Marcus as a baby, standing beside you. All of it was waiting. Was not it? Yes, I said. My own voice broken. It was all waiting. Catherine's clarity flickered. I could see it fading. The focus in her eyes softening. The present loosening its grip on her mind. She looked at me, and for a moment confusion crossed her face, as though seeing me for the first time. Then one last flash of recognition. Her hand found my cheek. Cool fingers against warm skin. Walter, you came back. I waited every day. I pressed her hand against my face and closed my eyes. Felt tears fall onto her fingers. Yes, I am here. I am not leaving again, she smiled. Soft, distant, already drifting back to wherever the disease took her when clarity retreated. Her hand relaxed in mine. Her gaze returned to the window. The cardinal was gone. I sat beside her for another hour, holding her hand, saying nothing, letting the weight of what she had given me settle into my bones. 25 years. Victor had confessed to Catherine a quarter-century before he acted, had been rejected, and had sworn revenge, and had spent the next 25 years constructing the instrument of my destruction while smiling at me across dinner tables and boardroom tables and holiday tables. This was never business, never greed, never ambition. This was love rejected, festering in silence for a generation, becoming something unrecognizable, something monstrous, and Catherine had carried that secret alone, protecting a friendship she thought was real, trusting that Victor's threat was empty, not knowing that every year of silence was another brick in the wall he was building around me. I kissed Catherine's forehead before I left. She did not react. The window had closed. She was somewhere else now. Somewhere I could not follow. But she had given me what I needed. Not just confirmation. Not just evidence. Purpose. Victor Pierce had done this because my wife chose me. And my wife, even now, even fading, had chosen me again, had fought through the fog of her own dissolving mind to arm me with the truth. I walked out of Sunrise Senior Living, into the November cold, and felt something settle in my chest. Not rage, not grief, resolution, the absolute certainty of what I was going to do and why. 25 years he waited. I would not need that long. Marcus told me everything later. Told it to Nadia first, then to the FBI, then to me. Each telling stripped another layer of pride away, until nothing remained but the raw truth of a man who realized too late that he had been a tool rather than a partner. It was a Thursday, 2 in the morning. 5 days after the article broke. Marcus had not slept properly since the gala. His temporary apartment, a one-bedroom rental in Somerville, paid month to month with the last of his accessible cash, felt like a coffin. Small, dark, smelling of takeout containers he had not bothered to throw away. He had spent 3 days trying to reach Victor. 17 calls, 42 text messages, 3 visits to the Commonwealth Avenue penthouse, where the doorman repeated the same phrase each time. Mr. Pierce no longer resides here. No forwarding address. On that Thursday night, Marcus drove to the Drummond Pierce offices in Back Bay. The building was empty at that hour. Security let him in. He was still technically COO, though the frozen accounts meant no one was being paid and the staff had stopped showing up 2 days earlier. He went to Victor's office on the 30th floor. Corner office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charles River. The kind of office that announced importance before its occupant said a word. But the office was bare. Personal effects removed. Bookshelves empty. The photograph of Victor and me at the company's 10th anniversary, the one that had hung behind his desk for 20 years, gone. Marcus sat at Victor's computer. The password had not been changed. Victor had not bothered. An oversight, Marcus thought at first. Later he understood it was not oversight. It was contempt. Victor had left the door unlocked because he did not believe Marcus was smart enough to find anything useful behind it. He was wrong about that. Marcus found the wire transfer confirmations in the deleted email folder. Not even permanently deleted. Just sitting in the trash. 3 transfers, $45 million total. Sent to Bauer und Hoffmann Vermögensverwaltung in Zurich. Recipient account. A numbered trust with no named beneficiary on file. Marcus scrolled through the associated documents. Correspondence with the Swiss bank dated back 18 months. The account had been established while I was still in prison. Before the article, before the freeze, before any of this became public, Victor had built his escape hatch a year and a half ago, and nowhere in any of the documents did Marcus Drummond's name appear. Not as beneficiary, not as co-signatory, not as anything. The $45 million was Victor's alone. The exit was Victor's alone. Marcus was not included in whatever future Victor had designed on the other side of this destruction. Marcus told me he sat in that chair for a long time, staring at the screen, watching the Charles River below catch streetlight in black and silver ribbons, thinking about 25 years of Victor Pierce. He thought about being 15. His mother newly diagnosed. His father consumed by work and grief. And there was Victor. Victor who took him to baseball games. Victor who helped with college applications. Victor who said things like, "Your father is a brilliant man but a difficult one. It is not your fault he does not know how to show love. Do not take it personally. I am here for you." He thought about being 22, fresh out of business school, eager to join the family company. And Victor, arm around his shoulder, whispering suggestions. Your father will never step aside willingly. He does not trust your generation. He thinks you are not ready. But I believe in you, Marcus. I have always believed in you. He thought about being 35, 5 years before the frame, sitting across from Victor at a steakhouse in the Back Bay, drunk on expensive bourbon, saying things he never said to anyone else. I love my father, but sometimes I hate him. He never listens, never takes my ideas seriously. He treats the company like his child, and me like his employee. And Victor, nodding, understanding, sympathetic, filing every word away, like ammunition for a weapon he was still assembling. 25 years. Not of friendship, of cultivation. Victor had grown Marcus's resentment the way a gardener grows poison. Patiently, attentively, one careful drop of suggestion at a time, until the day he was ready to harvest it. Marcus picked up his phone, dialed Victor's number, not expecting an answer. After 17 failures, Victor answered on the second ring. Marcus. His voice was warm, casual, as though they were discussing lunch plans. I was wondering when you would find those. Where are you? Marcus's voice cracked. That does not concern you anymore. The money. 45 million. There is nothing for me in those accounts. Nothing with my name. Silence. Then Victor laughed. Soft, almost tender. The way you laugh at a child who has just discovered that Santa Claus is not real. Marcus. Did you truly believe we were partners in this? That you were anything more than a useful lever? You served your purpose, just as your father served his. The difference is that your father was worth destroying. You were merely worth using. The words hung in the dark office. Marcus stared at the river below, at the lights of Cambridge, on the opposite bank. Somewhere over there, his sister was building the case that would put him in prison. And Victor Pierce, the man who had convinced him to betray his own father, was telling him he had never mattered at all. I did everything you asked, Marcus whispered. I testified against my own father. I helped you steal his company. I ruined my family. Yes. Victor's voice held no remorse, no guilt, only the patient condescension of a man addressing something beneath him. And I appreciate your service. But service is all it ever was. Goodbye, Marcus. The line went dead. Marcus sat in the dark for an hour. Maybe more. He told me later that he looked at the photographs still on his own desk. His family. His father. His sister. The people he had burned for a man who just told him he was nothing. At 3:47 in the morning, Marcus Drummond picked up his phone and dialed the one person he had no right to call. The one person who might still save him from the consequences of his own choices, not from prison. He knew prison was coming, but from becoming the man Victor Pierce had tried to make him. His sister answered on the fourth ring, voice sharp, alert, as though she had been waiting. Nadia. His voice broke on her name. I need to tell you everything. Nadia told me Marcus showed up at her door looking like something that had crawled out of a wreck. Unshaven. Eyes bloodshot. Wearing the same clothes he had worn to Victor's office hours earlier. Smelling of scotch and something worse. Desperation, maybe, or the particular stench of a man whose self-deception has finally collapsed. She almost did not open the door. Told me later her hand hovered over the deadbolt for 10 full seconds, while Marcus stood in the hallway saying her name over and over. Nadia. Nadia. Please. I know I have no right. Please. She opened it. Not out of mercy. Out of strategy. My daughter had been waiting for this moment for 18 months. Building toward it, knowing that eventually, Victor's cruelty would drive Marcus to the only people who might still hear his confession. She just had not expected it at 3 in the morning on a Thursday. Marcus stepped inside and saw the war room. The photographs. The red string. The timeline stretching across the wall. His face went white. You knew, he said. All of it. You have been building this. Sit down, Nadia said. Her voice was ice. He sat at the kitchen table. She poured him coffee. Black. No sugar. A small cruelty. That was also a kindness. He needed to be alert for what came next. I need to tell you everything, Marcus said. His hands wrapped around the mug like it was the only warm thing left in his life. Then tell me. He did. In fragments at first. Broken sentences. Half starts. But Nadia sat across from him in silence and waited. And eventually, the fragments became a river. Once it started flowing, it did not stop. He told her about Victor approaching him 3 years ago with the plan. How Victor had framed it as protection. Your father is making dangerous decisions. The safety protocols are slipping. If something goes wrong, if a patient dies because of his negligence, the whole company goes down. We need to remove him. For everyone's sake. He told her how Victor provided the falsified documents. The forged safety reports with Walter's digital signature copied from routine correspondence. The shell companies that would receive the embezzled funds. The intermediary who contacted Dr. Okafor. He told her about the judge. Victor arranged it. $200,000 to Judge Henley through a law firm in Delaware that specialized in untraceable payments. Marcus had not known the amount until afterward, and the night it happened. The night Marcus took the witness stand and lied under oath about his father. I knew Dad was innocent. Marcus's voice was barely audible. Nadia told me later that he could not look at her when he said it. Just stared at his coffee going cold. I knew he had not falsified anything. I knew the safety reports were Victor's fabrication. But I told myself it was necessary. That Dad was old. That he would not step aside. That the company needed new leadership. That this was the only way. Why? Nadia asked. One word. Sharp as a scalpel. Because Victor told me Dad never loved me. Marcus's chin trembled. He said Dad only loved you and Mom. That I was just the heir. The obligation. The name on the door that kept shareholders comfortable. And sometimes, Nadia, sometimes it felt true. The kitchen went silent. Nadia sat very still, processing, holding together. Then she stood up, walked around the table, and slapped Marcus across the face, hard enough to turn his head. Marcus did not react. did not flinch. Just sat there, with his cheek reddening, and his eyes filling with tears that he did not try to hide. "That is for Dad," Nadia said. For 2 years in a cell. For every night he spent alone. For every time he looked through plexiglass, and his own son would not meet his eyes. Then she did something Marcus told me he did not expect. She wrapped her arms around his shoulders and held him. Not gently, fiercely. The way you hold someone you are furious with and terrified for simultaneously. "It was never true," she said against his hair. "Dad loved you. More than you know. He talked about you constantly in those first 6 months before I started investigating. Even when he thought you had betrayed him. He kept saying there must be an explanation. Marcus would not do this without a reason. He loved you, Marcus." Victor lied. Marcus broke then. Not dramatically. Quietly. The way men break, when they have held something too long, and the container finally gives. Silent tears and shaking shoulders, and 25 years of manufactured resentment dissolving into grief. They sat like that for several minutes. Then Nadia pulled back, wiped her own eyes with the back of her hand, sat down across from him again. And when she spoke, her voice had shifted. No longer sister, investigator. "I need you to say all of that again." She pulled a digital recorder from the kitchen drawer, placed it on the table between them. Pressed record, everything. From the beginning. Names, dates, amounts. Everything Victor told you, everything you did. Leave nothing out. Marcus looked at the recorder. Then at his sister. "This will put me in prison." "Yes," Nadia said. "It will." He nodded slowly. "I know. I deserve it." He talked for 2 hours. Methodical now. Controlled. Giving Nadia everything. Every meeting with Victor. Every instruction. Every payment. The timeline of the conspiracy laid out in his own words, in his own voice. On a recording that would eventually be played in a courtroom. At 5:47 in the morning, Nadia sent the recording to FBI agent Maria Torres via encrypted file transfer. Torres called back within 20 minutes. "We have enough for a warrant," Torres said. Her voice was professional, but charged with the particular energy of a federal agent who has just received the break that makes a career. "But if you want Victor Pierce and not just his shadow, we need more. We need him in a room. We need him confident enough to say something incriminating on record." Marcus was listening on speaker. He looked at Nadia. "What do you need me to do?" "Nothing yet," Torres said. "Stay quiet. Stay visible. Let Victor believe you are still broken and isolated. When the time comes, we will need you in that courtroom. But for now, the best thing you can do is nothing." The call ended. Dawn was breaking through the kitchen window. Gray November light making the war room's photographs and strings look less like an investigation and more like what it was. A family trying to put itself back together by first understanding exactly how it had been torn apart. Nadia looked at Marcus. He looked back. Both of them exhausted. Both of them carrying wounds that would scar. "I am going to tell Dad," Nadia said. "Everything you said tonight. He deserves to know." Marcus nodded. "Will he forgive me?" Nadia was quiet for a long moment. Then she said the truest thing she could. "I do not know. But he will listen. That is more than you deserve right now. And it is enough to start." Victor Pierce walked into the emergency board meeting like he owned the room. He always had. For 30 years, that conference room on the 30th floor of our Back Bay headquarters had been as much his territory as mine. The Charles River stretched beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. 8 leather chairs lined the mahogany table, and Victor took his seat at the far end with the ease of a man who had never once questioned his right to be anywhere. He wore navy. Tom Ford again. Pocket square folded to geometric precision. His silver hair caught the winter light from the windows. If he was surprised by the emergency summons that had reached him through his lawyer rather than direct contact, he did not show it. Nothing in his posture or expression suggested a man whose accounts had been frozen, whose co-conspirator had confessed, whose carefully constructed world was 20 minutes from collapse. I watched from the adjacent office through a one-way glass panel. Raymond beside me, Nadia on the phone with Agent Torres, confirming that FBI agents were positioned in the lobby, in the stairwell, in a van on Boylston Street. The board members filed in. 8 men and women I had known for decades. Patricia Huang, Robert Caldwell, David Oyalaran, each face carrying the weight of what they had read in the evidence packets Raymond delivered the previous evening. They took their seats without greeting Victor, without small talk, without the usual pleasantries that preceded meetings in this room. Victor noticed. His eyes tracked the silence, the averted gazes, the way Patricia set her folder on the table with a deliberate heaviness. A faint crease appeared between his eyebrows. The first concession to uncertainty. "Shall we begin?" Victor said. His voice filled the room with practiced authority. "I understand there are concerns about the asset freeze. I assure you this is a temporary inconvenience created by my former partner's confusion following his release." The door opened. I stepped through. The room went still. 8 board members turned. Victor's head swiveled with the precision of a mechanism, and for 1/2 second, so brief that anyone who was not watching for it would have missed it, Victor Pierce's composure fractured. His eyes widened by a millimeter. His right hand, resting on the table, contracted into a half fist before consciously relaxing. Then the mask rebuilt itself. Faster than I would have thought possible. "Walter." Victor's voice was warm, concerned, a masterful performance of surprised friendship. "I was not told you would be here. How are you? You look well." I took my seat at the head of the table. The seat that had been mine for 40 years. The seat Victor had occupied in my absence. I said nothing. Let the silence work. Raymond stepped forward, opened his briefcase, began distributing documents to the board members. "Ladies and gentlemen." Raymond's voice carried the authority of a man presenting facts rather than arguments. "What you are receiving is a summary of findings from an 18-month forensic investigation into financial irregularities at Drummond Pierce Medical Technologies." Victor's eyes tracked the documents. His expression remained pleasant, attentive, interested, as though these were someone else's problems being discussed in someone else's boardroom. Raymond continued. "Finding 1. Dr. Samuel Okafor, declared dead due to device failure attributed to Walter Drummond, is alive and residing in Maine. He was paid $500,000 by Victor Pierce to disappear." A sharp intake of breath from Patricia Huang. Finding 2. The cardiac devices that caused the deaths of Elizabeth Hartwell and James Mwyn were tampered with after Walter Drummond's arrest. The timeline of failure is inconsistent with manufacturing defect. It is consistent with deliberate sabotage by someone with facility access. David Oyalaran set down his reading glasses. His hand was shaking. Finding 3. Judge Robert Henley received $200,000 through a Delaware intermediary 48 hours before Walter Drummond's trial. Finding 4. $45 million was transferred from corporate accounts to a Swiss-numbered trust 6 days ago. The beneficial owner of that trust is Victor Pierce. Raymond closed his folder. "I move for immediate removal of Victor Pierce from all positions within Drummond Pierce Medical Technologies. Termination of partnership. Referral of all findings to the United States Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution." I watched Victor's face through every word. The mask held. Extraordinary, really. A performance of composure that would have convinced anyone who did not know what I knew. But I saw the jaw, the fractional tightening that betrayed the machinery, working beneath the surface, calculating, adapting, finding the angle. The vote was unanimous. 8-0. Victor Pierce. Removed. Victor stood. Slowly. Buttoned his jacket with those precise fingers. Looked around the table at 8 faces that would not meet his eyes. then looked at me. Well played, Walter. His voice carried no anger, no desperation, only something cold and admiring, like a chess player acknowledging a superior move. He reached for his briefcase, paused. But you should know. His voice dropped. Intimate. Meant for me alone but audible to the room. I have files on every person at this table. Every shortcut. Every buried mistake. Every secret that keeps them awake at 3 in the morning. He smiled. A smile that chilled the room by several degrees. And I have something else, Walter. Something about Catherine. About January of 1999. He tilted his head. Ask her what happened that month. If she still remembers, if she can still tell you the truth. The words landed like a blade between my ribs. January 1999. What did he know? What was he claiming? Catherine could barely remember my name most days. She could not defend herself against whatever poison Victor was planting, but I held his gaze. Did not flinch. Did not ask the question he wanted me to ask. Security will escort you out, I said. Victor nodded. Almost respectful. 2 guards flanked him. He walked toward the door with the unhurried gait of a man leaving a restaurant rather than a career. At the threshold, he turned back. That confident smile again. This is not over, Walter. I have 30 years of this company's secrets. 30 years of yours. And unlike you, I am not burdened by sentiment. The door closed behind him. The boardroom released a collective breath. Patricia's hands were shaking. David stared at the table. Robert Caldwell poured himself water and missed the glass. Raymond looked at me. His expression said what he would not say aloud in this room. Victor did not look like a man who had lost. He looked like a man changing battlefields. January 1999. The date burrowed into my thoughts. What was Victor claiming? What weapon did he believe he held? Catherine could not tell me. Not reliably. Not through the fog that swallowed more of her mind each day. And Victor knew that. Had chosen that specific vulnerability. With the same precision, he chose everything. But I had something Victor did not anticipate. Catherine's diaries. 40 years of journals, meticulous and detailed, stored in boxes in our Beacon Hill home. Whatever happened or did not happen in January 1999, it would be there, in Catherine's own handwriting. Before the disease took her words away, Victor Pierce had fired his last shot, and I would prove it was loaded with blanks. The boxes were in the attic of our Beacon Hill brownstone. 14 of them. Banker's boxes, each labeled in Catherine's precise handwriting with a year range, 1982 through 1985, 1986 through 1989. 40 years of a woman's inner life, documented in leather-bound journals with the same discipline she brought to her medical research. I found the box labeled 1997 through 2000 and opened it on the kitchen table. The journal for 1999 was burgundy leather, its spine cracked from use. Catherine had written in it nearly every day. Her handwriting in that era was confident, fluid. The penmanship of a woman at the peak of her intellectual powers. I turned to January 1st. New Year's dinner at the Pierces. Victor and Linda served that terrible ossobuco again. Walter pretended to enjoy it. Marcus spilled grape juice on Linda's white carpet. Nadia slept through the whole party in her car seat. Good start to the year. January 4th. Back to the lab. New grant proposal due Friday. Walter working late again. Made him promise to be home for Marcus's school play on Thursday. January 7th. Marcus's play. He was a tree. Stood very still and looked terrified. Victor came. Brought flowers for Marcus afterward. Sweet of him. I read through the entire month. Every entry. Every mundane, beautiful, ordinary detail of a family's life in January of 1999. Grocery lists. Research notes. Arguments about whose turn it was to pick up dry cleaning. A funny story about Nadia learning to tie her shoes. A complaint about Boston's plumbing in winter. Nothing. Absolutely nothing unusual. No secrets. No betrayals. No hidden truth that Victor could weaponize. January 1999 was a month like any other month in a marriage that was exactly what it appeared to be. Loving. Imperfect. Real. Victor had bluffed. Had planted a seed of doubt knowing Catherine could not defend herself. Knowing that Alzheimer's had stolen her ability to simply say, "Nothing happened. He is lying." A final act of cruelty aimed not at me, but at the one person who could no longer protect herself from his manipulation. I closed the journal, pressed my hand flat against its cover, felt the leather warm beneath my palm, and made a promise to the woman who had written these words 27 years ago. "He will never hurt you again, Catherine. Not even with lies." I drove to Cambridge that afternoon. Nadia's apartment had transformed further in the week since Marcus's confession. New documents covered the dining table. A second laptop showed FBI case management software. Agent Torres had been there in person twice. Raymond was already present when I arrived. So was Thomas Griffith. My former cellmate sat at the kitchen table in civilian clothes, jeans and a flannel shirt. He looked different outside of prison. Younger, more alive. But those investigators' eyes were the same, missing nothing. "January 99? Nadia asked as I walked in. "Blank," I said. "Normal entries." "Nothing." He bluffed. Nadia exhaled. "I knew it. Psychological warfare. He wanted you off balance before the trial. It did not work," I said. "And now we focus on what does work." I looked at Thomas. "You had something." Thomas leaned forward, placed a manila folder on the table. Inside were printouts of email correspondence and what appeared to be shipping manifests. While I was inside, Thomas began. "I shared a commissary rotation with a man named Derek Fenn. Low-level fixer. Did odd jobs for people who needed things moved or people silenced. 6 months ago, Fenn got drunk on smuggled alcohol and started talking about a job he did for a medical company executive 2 years back. Swapping components in hospital inventory. Small devices. Cardiac implants." The room went quiet. "I got him talking 3 more times over the following months," Thomas continued. "Never pushed. Just listened. Eventually, he gave me enough details to identify the job. 2 cardiac implant units at Massachusetts General Hospital, swapped from certified Drummond-Pierce devices to modified units with an intentional fatigue flaw in the lead wire. The flaw would not manifest for 3 to 6 weeks after implantation, which is exactly the timeline for Elizabeth Hartwell and James Nguyen," Nadia said quietly. Thomas nodded. "Fenn said his employer was a man he knew only as Mr. P. Payment was $80,000 in cash. Delivered in a gym bag." Raymond stood and began pacing. "This is not circumstantial. If Fenn will testify, this connects Victor directly to the device tampering, to the actual deaths. This is murder." "Agent Torres already has Fenn," Thomas said. "Picked him up last week on an unrelated parole violation. He is cooperating in exchange for reduced sentencing on the new charges." I sat down slowly, the weight of it settling through me. Victor had not just framed me. He had killed 2 people. Real people. Elizabeth Hartwell, 63, retired school teacher, grandmother of 4. James Nguyen, 45, software engineer, father of 2 young boys. Victor had put modified devices into their chests and waited for them to die so that a jury would see real bodies and feel real grief and convict an innocent man. "This changes the charges," Raymond said. His voice was strained. "We are no longer looking at fraud and conspiracy alone. This is first-degree murder. 2 counts. Premeditated." "What does this mean for the trial?" I asked. "It means Victor Pierce is facing life without parole," Nadia said. "Not 20 years. Not 30. Life. Torres called it in this morning. Thomas added. The U.S. attorney upgraded the case. Grand jury is being convened next week for the murder indictments. Trial is set for January 14th. 2 months. 2 months to prepare everything. To assemble witnesses. To bring Dr. Okafor from Maine. To prepare Marcus's testimony. To ensure Fenn's cooperation held. 2 months for Victor Pierce to realize that he was no longer facing financial ruin, but a cage for the rest of his life. What about Victor? I asked. His location. Still in the country, Raymond confirmed. FBI tracked a credit card usage in Connecticut 3 days ago. They believe he is in the Northeast, monitoring the situation. His passport remains flagged. Every border crossing, every airport, every port authority is watching. He will not run, I said. The others looked at me. Victor does not run. He fights. He calculates. He adapts. Running would mean admitting defeat. And Victor Pierce has never admitted defeat in his life. So he comes to trial, Nadia said. He comes to trial. And when he does, a dead man will be waiting for him in the witness chair. The room settled into the particular silence of people preparing for something enormous. Outside the window, November had turned the Charles River to hammered steel. In 2 months, January would bring ice and snow and a courtroom where 30 years of friendship would finally be weighed and judged. I was ready, we all were. January in Boston is punishment disguised as weather. The morning of the 14th brought freezing rain that coated the Suffolk County Courthouse steps in a sheet of black ice. Reporters slipped on it. Camera operators cursed. The satellite trucks lining Cambridge Street ran their engines for warmth, exhaust plumes rising into gray air, like smoke signals announcing something significant. I climbed those steps with Nadia on my right and Raymond on my left. Steady, deliberate. Each step placed with the care of a man who had learned patience in a concrete cell and was not about to rush now. Not when everything depended on precision. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled. Press credentials had been denied to overflow applicants 3 weeks earlier. The gallery buzzed with the particular energy of people who had followed a story for months and were finally witnessing its conclusion. I recognized faces from news broadcasts. Legal analysts who had been dissecting this case on television. Since Claire's article broke, we took our seats behind the prosecution table. Assistant U.S. Attorney Diana Reeves sat at the front, her case files organized with military precision. Beside her, a junior prosecutor sorted exhibit binders. The evidence wall behind them held mounted photographs, bank records, timeline charts. The architecture of Victor's conspiracy displayed like a museum exhibit. Then, the side door opened. Victor Pierce entered the courtroom in handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit, and even in those circumstances, even shackled and dressed in institutional fabric, he carried himself like a man attending a board meeting that was running slightly behind schedule. Back straight, chin level, eyes scanning the room with calm assessment rather than fear. They had arrested him in December. A hotel in Stamford, Connecticut, 40 minutes from the border. Not fleeing, just as I had predicted. Monitoring, calculating, waiting. He had come willingly when the FBI knocked, had reportedly offered the arresting agents coffee from his room service tray. Victor's legal team consisted of 3 attorneys from Morrison and Eckhart. Expensive. Aggressive. The kind of lawyers who charged by the quarter hour and earned every cent. They had filed 11 pre-trial motions, all denied. Had attempted to suppress Marcus's recordings. Denied. Had challenged Dr. Okafor's credibility. Denied. Judge Patricia Wardell was not Judge Henley. She could not be bought. Victor sat at the defense table. His cuffed hands rested on the surface with deliberate composure. He did not look at me. Did not look at Nadia. Stared straight ahead at the judge's empty bench with an expression of mild interest. All rise. Judge Wardell entered. Mid-50s. Black robe. An expression that communicated zero tolerance for theatrics. She had a reputation for efficiency. for cutting through legal maneuvering with surgical directness. Good. This trial did not need drama. It needed truth. The prosecution may make opening statements. Diana Reeves stood. Approached the jury. 12 faces watching with the careful attention of people who understood the weight of their responsibility. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about a man who spent 30 years pretending to be a friend while engineering the complete destruction of the man beside him. Her voice was measured, clear, not theatrical. The facts did not require embellishment. Victor Pierce framed his business partner for murder. He bribed a judge. He paid a living man to fake his death. And when that was not enough, when the frame needed real bodies to convince a jury, he tampered with cardiac devices implanted in 2 patients. Elizabeth Hartwell and James Nguyen died because Victor Pierce needed their deaths to complete his lie. Several jurors glanced at Victor. He remained still, expression unchanged. The defense will present Victor Pierce as a loyal partner, unfairly accused. Diana continued. They will claim the evidence is fabricated, that Marcus Drummond's confession is self-serving, that Dr. Okafor is lying. But the evidence will show otherwise. Bank records do not lie. Dead men brought back to life do not lie. And the timeline of device failure, occurring after Walter Drummond was already in federal custody, cannot be explained by any theory that includes his guilt. She returned to her seat. The defense attorney stood. An older man named Harold Fitch, whose silver hair and measured voice projected gravitas. Ladies and gentlemen, my client is a decorated medical executive who built one of the most important healthcare companies in America. He is being accused by a business partner with a proven motive for revenge, by a son seeking leniency, by a paid witness with a criminal past. We will show that the evidence assembled against Victor Pierce is the product of a coordinated campaign of retaliation, not justice. Fitch sat. Judge Wardell nodded. The prosecution may call its first witness. Diana stood. The state calls Dr. Nadia Drummond. My daughter rose from her seat beside me, squeezed my hand once, briefly, then walked to the witness stand. She was sworn in, sat down, adjusted the microphone with the calm precision of a doctor addressing a medical board. Dr. Drummond. Diana began. You are a physician at Massachusetts General Hospital, correct? Internal medicine resident. 3rd year. In the course of your work, did you discover irregularities in the medical records pertaining to this case? Yes. Nadia's voice was steady. In June of last year, I was processing a routine patient transfer and discovered that insurance claims were still being filed under the patient number of Dr. Samuel Okafor, a man officially listed as deceased for 18 months. She walked the jury through the discovery, the billing anomaly, the investigation, tracing Okafor to Maine. Then she arrived at the critical point. I also examined the device failure reports for Elizabeth Hartwell and James Nguyen. The official record states these failures resulted from manufacturing defects in devices certified by my father. However, Nadia paused. Let the silence work. The device implantation dates and failure timelines are inconsistent with manufacturing defect. Both devices functioned normally for their initial monitoring period. Failure occurred at 6 weeks and 8 weeks respectively. My father was arrested on October 1st. The devices were implanted on October 10th and October 22nd. After his arrest, the courtroom stirred. Several jurors leaned forward, meaning Diana said, "Your father could not have been responsible for any defect in those devices." Correct. He was in federal custody. He had no access to hospital inventory, no access to the devices, no ability to tamper with anything. Someone else introduced those defects after his arrest. Fitch stood. Objection. Witness is speculating about tampering. Overruled. Judge Wardell's voice was flat. The witness is presenting medical record analysis within her professional competence. Nadia continued for another 20 minutes. Methodical. Precise. unshakable. Fitch's cross-examination attempted to paint her as biased. A daughter defending her father, emotionally compromised. Dr. Drummond, you love your father, correct? Yes. And you want him exonerated. I want the truth established. The truth is in the records. Records you interpreted with a clear bias toward your father's innocence. Nadia looked at Fitch with the particular patience of a doctor explaining something to a slow learner. Medical timelines are not subject to emotional interpretation. Mr. Fitch, October 1st is before October 10th, regardless of how I feel about my father. A juror in the back row smiled. Fitch sat down. Day 1 ended at 4:30. The jury filed out. The gallery dispersed into the corridor's chaos of reporters and cameras. I looked at Victor as guards prepared to escort him out. He was watching me, and he was smiling. Not a nervous smile, not a defeated smile, a confident one, settled and calm, and absolutely certain. That smile kept me awake that night, because it meant one of two things. Either Victor Pierce was the greatest actor alive, performing composure while his world burned, or he had something left, some card we had not seen, some weapon still hidden. Tomorrow I would take the stand. Tomorrow I would tell 12 strangers about 30 years of friendship and betrayal. And I would do it with that smile, watching me from across the room. Day 2. I wore the charcoal suit Raymond had selected. Simple, understated. The suit of a man with nothing to prove and everything to say. Nadia straightened my tie in the courthouse corridor, her fingers trembling slightly though her face remained composed. You do not have to rehearse, she said. Just tell them the truth. That is enough. The truth. After 2 years of living inside a lie, the truth felt like a foreign language I was still relearning. The prosecution calls Walter Drummond. I stood, walked to the witness stand, felt the weight of every eye in that room settle on my shoulders, placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth. Sat down, adjusted the microphone, and looked at the jury. 12 faces, some sympathetic, some guarded, all waiting. Diana Reeves approached. Mr. Drummond, please tell the court about your relationship with Victor Pierce. I took a breath. 30 years. How do you compress 30 years into testimony? How do you explain to 12 strangers what it means to trust someone completely and discover that trust was a weapon pointed at your chest the entire time? I met Victor Pierce in 1983, I began. MIT graduate program. Biomedical engineering. He was brilliant. The smartest person in any room he entered. We became friends immediately. The kind of friendship where you finish each other's sentences, where you stay up until 3 in the morning arguing about circuit design and protein folding and whether the Red Sox would ever win a pennant again. I paused. Let the memory settle. We started the company together. My garage. 1983. 2 folding tables and a soldering iron my wife bought at a yard sale. Victor handled the business side. I handled research and development. We built Drummond Pierce from nothing into a company that put life-saving cardiac devices into hospitals across 47 states. $200 million. 400 employees. 41 years of partnership. Diana let the silence work. Then what changed, Mr. Drummond? Nothing changed. That is what I did not understand for the longest time. Nothing changed because nothing was ever what I believed it was. Victor's friendship was never friendship. It was a 30-year performance. A mask worn with such patience and precision that I never once thought to look behind it. I looked at Victor then. Across the courtroom, he sat perfectly still, watching me with that calm expression. No anger, no remorse, just cold attention. I trusted this man with my company, I continued. With my children. He was my son's godfather. He held Marcus as an infant. He attended every birthday, every holiday, every milestone. He sat at my dinner table 1,000 times and smiled at my wife and laughed at my jokes and built his betrayal so slowly, so carefully, that when it finally came, I did not even see it happening. A woman in the jury's second row pressed a tissue to her eyes. Diana asked me about the arrest, about the trial, about prison. I told them. Not the rage, not the revenge, just the facts. 730 days in Federal Medical Center Devons for crimes I did not commit. Crimes that were manufactured by the man sitting 20 feet from me. Fitch rose for cross-examination. His approach was different today. Gentler. He knew aggression toward a 72-year-old wrongfully convicted man would alienate the jury. Mr. Drummond, you claim Victor Pierce was never truly your friend. But for 30 years, you noticed nothing. No warning signs? No moments of doubt? I considered the question honestly. No. In 30 years, you never once suspected your partner of harboring ill will toward you? No. Because I trusted him. Completely. The way you trust the ground beneath your feet. You do not examine it every morning to make sure it is still solid. You simply walk on it and believe it will hold, Fitch pressed. Is it not possible that you are mistaken about Mr. Pierce's motives? That this is a business dispute that has been elevated into something criminal by a daughter with an agenda? I looked at Fitch. Then I looked at Victor. Then I looked at the jury. Let me tell you something about trust, I said. My voice carried in the quiet room. The most dangerous person in the world is not the stranger who hates you. A stranger's hatred is visible. You can see it coming. You can prepare. You can defend yourself. The most dangerous person in the world is the friend who smiles at you for 30 years while sharpening a knife behind his back. Because you never look for the knife. You never think to. Why would you? He is your friend. The courtroom was silent. Fitch stood motionless. Several jurors stared at Victor with new eyes. Fitch tried 2 more questions. Neither landed. He sat down. Diana stood again. Redirect, Your Honor. Mr. Drummond, what did Victor Pierce say to you during his final prison visit? The night before your release? I met Victor's eyes across the room. Held them. He said I should have shared her. Meaning my wife, Catherine. He said he had waited 30 years. He said he was taking everything because I took the only thing he ever truly wanted. The courtroom stirred. Victor's jaw tightened. First visible reaction of the day. Diana nodded. Thank you. One final matter, Your Honor. The prosecution wishes to introduce Exhibit 47. Audio recordings made by Marcus Drummond during conversations with Victor Pierce over the past 3 years. Fitch shot up. Objection. These recordings were made without Mr. Pierce's consent. Massachusetts is a 2-party consent state. Your Honor, Diana countered. These recordings were made with the full cooperation of Marcus Drummond, who is a named co-conspirator turned state's witness. Federal wiretap exceptions apply under Title III, given the ongoing criminal enterprise. Judge Wardell considered for 3 seconds. Overruled. The recordings are admissible. Diana addressed the jury. Tomorrow, you will hear Victor Pierce in his own words. Planning, directing, laughing about the destruction of his partner of 30 years. Tomorrow, you will hear the voice behind the mask. She turned to me. Thank you, Mr. Drummond. You may step down. I returned to my seat. Nadia's hand found mine immediately. Squeezed hard. Raymond nodded once. Approval without words. Across the room, Victor's lawyers huddled. Fitch was speaking rapidly. Gestures sharp. The composure that had defined their table for 2 days showed its first fracture. They had not expected the recordings to be admitted. They had built motions, filed challenges, and lost. Victor himself sat apart from the huddle. Still, watching nothing. But that smile, the confident one that had kept me awake last night, was gone, replaced by something I had never seen on his face in 41 years of knowing him. Uncertainty. Tomorrow. One word that carried the weight of 30 years. Tomorrow. A dead man would walk into this courtroom. Tomorrow, Victor's own voice would echo from speakers. Stripped of performance. Raw with cruelty. Tomorrow, the mask would be removed permanently, and Victor Pierce knew it. I could see it in the set of his shoulders, in the way his composure had shifted from confidence to control. He was no longer a man who believed he would win. He was a man determining how much he could survive losing. That shift was everything. Because a man fighting to win is dangerous. But a man fighting to survive is predictable. Tomorrow would end this. Day 3 started like the others. Routine. Technical. The prosecution called a forensic accountant who walked the jury through shell company structures for 40 minutes. Defense cross-examined without landing anything significant. The courtroom settled into the rhythm of evidence presentation, the kind of procedural pacing that makes observers check their watches. Then Diana Reeves stood. Your Honor. The state calls its next witness. She paused. 1 beat. 2. Letting the silence stretch until every eye in the room was on her. The state calls Dr. Samuel Okafor. The courtroom went still. Not quiet. Still. The absolute cessation of movement that occurs when a room full of people simultaneously stops breathing. Victor's head turned. Slowly, mechanically, toward the rear doors of the courtroom. They opened. A man walked through. 52 years old. Tall. Dark-skinned. Wearing a simple gray suit and the expression of someone who had carried a heavy secret for too long and was finally setting it down. He walked down the center aisle with measured steps, each one echoing in the profound silence. Samuel Okafor. The man Victor Pierce had paid $500,000 to disappear. The man whose death certificate had been used to convict me. The man the world had believed was dead for over 2 years. Alive. Walking. Breathing. Present. I watched Victor's face. Watched it the way a scientist watches a chemical reaction. And I saw it happen. The thing I had waited 800 days to see. Victor Pierce's composure shattered. Not a crack. Not a fracture. A complete structural failure. His eyes went wide. Genuinely wide. His mouth opened slightly. His hands, resting on the defense table, began to tremble. A fine vibration that traveled up his arms and into his shoulders. 41 years I had known this man, and I had never once seen him lose control. Until now. Okafor was sworn in. Sat down. Adjusted the microphone with hands that shook slightly, but steadied as he began to speak. Diana approached. Dr. Okafor, you were declared dead on October 3rd, 2 years ago. Cause of death listed as cardiac device failure attributed to manufacturing negligence by Drummond Pierce Medical Technologies. Is that correct? That is what the records say. Okafor's voice was quiet but clear. But I am not dead. Obviously. Can you tell the court what actually happened? Okafor looked at his hands, then at the jury. Then, briefly, at Victor. In August of that year, I was contacted by a man through an intermediary. The man identified himself as a senior executive at a medical technology company. He offered me $500,000 to disappear, to assume a new identity in another state, to let the world believe I had died from a device malfunction. Did you know why? Not entirely. I was told it related to corporate restructuring, insurance matters. I did not ask sufficient questions. Okafor's voice carried shame. I took the money. I moved to Maine. I became someone else. I am not proud of that decision, and the man who contacted you. Can you identify him? Okafor looked directly at Victor. That man. Victor Pierce. He arranged everything personally. The payment. The new identity documents. The logistics of my disappearance. Victor's lawyer shot up. Objection. This witness has a clear financial motive to cooperate with the prosecution. He accepted $500,000. Your Honor, Diana countered. The witness is testifying under immunity. His financial records and identity documents corroborate his account independently of his testimony. Overruled. Judge Wardell's voice was iron. Continue. Diana turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, you have now heard from a man who was declared dead, who is demonstrably alive, whose death was used to convict Walter Drummond. She paused. Now you will hear from Victor Pierce himself. She pressed a button on the courtroom's audio system. Marcus's voice came first. Thin. Nervous. The quality of the recording slightly compressed, but perfectly audible. Victor, are you sure about this? What if something goes wrong? Then Victor's voice. Unmistakable. That smooth baritone I had heard across dinner tables and boardroom tables for 3 decades. But different now. Stripped of the warmth he performed in public. Cold, efficient, the voice of a man discussing logistics rather than lives. Nothing will go wrong because I have planned for every contingency. Your father is an obstacle, Marcus. Remove him, or I will remove you both. Pinnacle does not require sentimentality. It requires decisive action. Another recording. Victor laughing. The sound chilled the courtroom. The old fool is rotting exactly where he belongs. 2 years is generous, frankly. I would have preferred 10. But we work within the system available to us. Victor stood abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor. Those are fabricated. His voice cracked. Louder than he intended. Desperate in a way that echoed through the silent courtroom. Those recordings are manufactured. They are not my voice. This is a conspiracy. Mr. Pierce, sit down. Judge Wardell's gavel came down hard. One more outburst, and I will hold you in contempt. Fitch grabbed Victor's arm, pulled him back into his seat, whispered furiously in his ear. Victor sat, but the damage was done. 12 jurors had just watched a man whose composure had been supernatural for 2 days suddenly lose all control at the sound of his own voice. Diana waited. Let the moment breathe. Then, played the final recording. This one was different. Not a conversation about business or strategy. Victor's voice alone, speaking to Marcus. Late at night, by the sound of it, bourbon loosening the words that daylight kept locked. Your father had everything I ever wanted, Marcus. The company was mine to build, but Catherine. Victor's recorded voice turned soft, almost tender, almost human. She should have chosen me. I loved her first. Before your father. Before anyone, and she chose him anyway. 25 years I watched them together. 25 years of smiling and waiting. Now, Walter loses everything. Just like I lost her. Poetic. Is it not? The recording ended. Silence. Absolute. Total. The kind of silence that has weight and texture. Victor sat motionless. His hands flat on the table. His face empty. Not composed. Empty. The mask was not rebuilt. It was gone. Destroyed by his own words played back to him in a room full of people who now understood exactly what he was. Diana addressed the jury one final time. 30 years of friendship. Manufactured. 30 years of patience. Weaponized. 2 people dead. 1 man imprisoned for crimes he did not commit. All because a woman chose love over obsession. She turned to Judge Wardell. The prosecution rests. Your Honor. Judge Wardell looked at the defense table. Mr. Fitch. Does the defense wish to present its case? Fitch stood. Looked at his client. At the jury. At 12 faces, holding expressions ranging from disgust to pity to cold fury. Your Honor, may we request a recess to consult with our client? 30 minutes. Judge Wardell's gavel fell. The courtroom erupted into motion. Reporters rushing for exits. Gallery members talking over each other. But I sat still, watching Victor being led away by guards. His head was bowed. His shoulders curled inward. He did not look back. Nadia's hand found mine. Squeezed. "It is over," she whispered. "Not yet," I said. "But close. Close enough to feel. The jury would deliberate tomorrow." And whatever came next, Victor Pierce had already been destroyed. Not by the verdict that was coming. Not by the sentence that would follow. By his own voice. His own words. His own confession of 30 years of calculated hatred disguised as love. The mask was gone. And what remained beneath it was exactly what I had always suspected. Nothing. Just an empty man who had spent his entire life wanting something that was never his, and destroying everything within reach because he could not have it. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. 6 hours to weigh 30 years of betrayal, 2 deaths, 1 fabricated death, 1 wrongful conviction, and $45 million in stolen assets. I sat in the courthouse corridor with Nadia beside me, our hands clasped on the wooden bench, and waited. Raymond paced. He could not help it. 30 years as a litigator, and the man still could not sit still during deliberation. He walked the same 20-foot stretch of marble hallway, turned, walked back. His shoes made a rhythm on the stone. Click, click, click. Like a metronome counting down to resolution. At 4:17 in the afternoon, the bailiff appeared. "Jury is returning." The courtroom filled in minutes. Every seat occupied. Every camera position manned. The gallery hummed with the particular frequency of collective anticipation. I took my seat. Nadia beside me. Raymond behind. Victor was brought in. He moved differently now. The supernatural composure of the first 2 days was gone. In its place was something diminished. Smaller. His shoulders had a curve to them that had not been there before. His eyes were fixed on the table in front of him. He did not scan the room. Did not acknowledge anyone. Just sat. "All rise." Judge Wardell entered. Took her seat. Addressed the jury foreman, a middle-aged man in a blue tie who stood with a folded paper in his hands. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud." "How do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of wire fraud." "How do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of bribery of a federal official." "How do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of obstruction of justice." "How do you find?" "Guilty." "On the first count of murder in the 2nd degree, in the death of Elizabeth Hartwell." "How do you find?" "Guilty." A sound escaped from someone in the gallery. A gasp or a sob. "On the 2nd count of murder in the 2nd degree, in the death of James Wynne." "How do you find?" "Guilty." 6 counts. 6 guilty verdicts. The words fell like hammer strikes on iron. Final. Absolute. Irrevocable. Victor did not move. Did not react. Just sat with his head slightly bowed, hands flat on the table, staring at nothing. Whatever he was feeling, whatever processed behind those eyes, he kept it locked away. One final performance of control. Though the audience no longer believed it, Judge Wardell spoke. "Mr. Pierce, please stand." Victor stood. Slowly. His lawyers flanked him. "Victor Pierce, I sentence you to 30 years in federal prison on the fraud, conspiracy, bribery, and obstruction charges. On the 2 counts of 2nd-degree murder, I sentence you to 25 years each, to run consecutively. Total sentence, 80 years. She paused. "You will die in prison, Mr. Pierce. And that is the most merciful outcome available, given what you have done." Victor said nothing, stared straight ahead. "Do you have anything to say before sentencing is finalized?" Silence. 5 seconds. 10. Then Victor turned. Not toward the judge, toward me. His eyes found mine across the courtroom. And when he spoke, his voice was quiet, almost intimate. as though we were alone in a room rather than surrounded by hundreds of witnesses. She did love me. Once. Before you. You never knew that. But she did. I held his gaze. Said nothing. Gave him nothing. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Not even pity. Just the silence of a man who had already won and did not need to prove it. Victor turned back to face the judge. The guards took his arms, and Victor Pierce walked out of that courtroom for the last time. His back was straight. His step was measured, but his hands, cuffed behind him, trembled visibly. The last thing I saw before the door closed was that tremor. The body betraying what the face refused to show. Judge Wardell turned to the second matter. Marcus Drummond. Marcus stood at the adjacent table. He wore a suit, not a jumpsuit. His cooperation had earned him that dignity. But his face was gray, drawn. End quote. The face of a man who knew what was coming and had accepted it. Marcus Drummond, you have pleaded guilty to conspiracy and fraud. In consideration of your substantial cooperation with the prosecution, your testimony, and your recorded confession, I sentence you to 5 years in federal prison. Eligible for parole in 3. The judge's voice softened slightly. You were manipulated, Mr. Drummond. That does not absolve you, but it is noted. Marcus nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. The guards came. Marcus stood, turned toward me. His eyes were wet, red-rimmed. He did not speak, just looked at me with everything he could not say written across his face. Then he mouthed 2 words. Silent, but unmistakable. I am sorry. I nodded. Once. The smallest acknowledgement. Then Marcus was led away through the side door, following the same path Victor had taken minutes earlier. Father and son. Into the same system. Different sentences. Different reasons, but the same destination. Judge Wardell addressed the courtroom one final time. The matter of Walter Drummond's wrongful conviction will be handled separately. However, this court notes for the record that the evidence presented in this trial conclusively demonstrates that Walter Drummond was innocent of all charges for which he was convicted. The court recommends immediate and full exoneration. The gavel fell. Final. Absolute. Exonerated. The words settled through me like sunlight through dark water, reaching parts of me that had been cold for 2 years. 800 days of being inmate 04719. 800 days of a number instead of a name. Done. Erased. Gone. Nadia's arms were around me before I was fully aware she had moved. Her face pressed against my shoulder, her body shaking with sobs she had been holding back for 2 years. Not grief. Relief. The physical release of 24 months of sustained tension finally breaking. Dad. Her voice was wrecked. It is over. It is finally over. I held her. Let my own tears come. Quiet ones. The kind that fall without sound and mean everything. Outside on the courthouse steps, January wind cut through my coat. Cameras flashed. Microphones extended. Reporters called questions that overlapped into chaos. Mr. Drummond, how do you feel? I stood at the top of those steps. Nadia beside me. Raymond behind. The city of Boston stretched below us. Gray and cold and indifferent. Justice delayed is not justice denied, I said. My voice carried in the January air. But it still costs. 30 years of friendship turned out to be 30 years of waiting. Every dinner, every holiday, every handshake, all of it was preparation for my destruction. Victor Pierce did not just steal my company or my freedom. He poisoned every good memory I had of our friendship. Every laugh we shared is a lie now. That is the cruelest theft of all. A reporter called out. What about your son? My son made terrible choices under the influence of a man who spent 25 years grooming him. I said, Marcus will serve his time. What comes after? That is, between us. And Victor Pierce? Victor Pierce will die in prison. That is sufficient. I do not need more than justice. Revenge was never the goal. Truth was the goal. And today, the truth won. Nadia broke then. Publicly. On the courthouse steps with cameras recording. 2 years of composure dissolving into tears that she could not stop and did not try to. I pulled her close, let her cry against my shoulder while flashbulbs popped and reporters fell respectfully silent. Raymond guided us toward the car. The crowd parted, and as I walked down those icy steps, I felt something lift. Not all of it. Not the grief for Catherine fading in her room. Not the loss of 30 years of friendship revealed as fiction, but the weight of injustice. That, at least, was gone. I turned to Raymond at the car door. Take me to Sunrise Senior Living. He nodded. Of course. The drive was quiet. Boston passing outside the windows. Snow beginning to fall. Light and slow. Covering the city in something clean. The snow had stopped falling by the time Raymond pulled into the Sunrise Senior Living parking lot. The world was white and hushed. The kind of quiet that only comes after fresh snowfall, when even the air seems to hold its breath. I walked through the lobby without stopping at reception. The evening staff knew me now. 3 weeks of daily visits since my release had made my face familiar. They nodded as I passed. One nurse, a young woman named Grace who had been particularly kind to Catherine, touched my arm briefly. She had a good day, Grace said softly. Ate all her dinner. Watched the birds for an hour. Thank you. Catherine's room was warm. Lamplight. The scent of lavender from the diffuser Nadia had placed on the windowsill. Debussy playing quietly from the small speaker on the nightstand. And Catherine, sitting in her armchair by the window, wrapped in the cream cardigan, her silver hair catching the soft light. She was watching the snow through the glass. The fresh white covering the garden below, smoothing every edge, erasing every imperfection, making the world look new. I pulled the other chair close, sat beside her, took her hand the way I had taken it every day for 43 years. Cool fingers curling around mine with that automatic pressure that I had learned to stop questioning. Whether it was reflex or recognition did not matter anymore. It was enough that she held on. Catherine, I said. It is over. We won. Nothing. Her eyes on the snow. The cardinal was absent tonight. Just white stillness beyond the glass. I talked anyway. Told her about the verdict. About Victor's sentence. About Marcus. About Nadia on the courthouse steps, crying with relief. I told her everything. The way I used to tell her about my day over dinner, because Catherine had always been the person I told everything to. And even now, even with her mind fading like ink in rain, I could not imagine keeping anything from her. I finished talking. Sat in the quiet. Held her hand. Watched snow accumulate on the bird feeder outside. Then Catherine turned her head, looked at me, and her eyes were clear. Walter. My name in her voice. Undamaged. Present. Real. You came back. My throat closed. Yes. I came back. I will always come back. She studied my face with an intensity that belonged to the Catherine I married. The researcher. The scientist. The woman who examined everything with precision before drawing conclusions. You look tired, she said. But lighter. Like something heavy has been put down. It has, I managed. Today. Finally. Good. She squeezed my hand. Then her brow furrowed slightly. That expression of concentration. Assembling thoughts from scattered pieces before the window closed again. Marcus. What about Marcus? Did you forgive him? He is going to prison, Catherine. 5 years. That is not what I asked. Her voice carried a firmness that cut through the fog like a blade. Did you forgive him? I looked at our joined hands. At her thin fingers wrapped around mine. At 43 years of marriage, compressed into this single point of contact. I do not know if I can. Catherine was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke with the particular clarity of someone who knows their words are numbered and refuses to waste them. Walter. Marcus was a boy who wanted his father's approval. You were building an empire. Victor was building a weapon. And Marcus was caught between you both, too young to know he was being used. She paused. You were not there enough. I love you, but you were not there enough. And Victor filled that space with poison, drop by drop, year by year, until our son believed his own father did not love him. The words hit like stones dropped into still water, each one sending ripples through everything I believed about myself, about my family, about the choices I made while building a company I thought was my legacy. I was building it for them, I said. My voice barely audible. I know. Catherine's thumb traced circles on the back of my hand. But they did not need the company, Walter. They needed you. Nadia had me. She was fine. But Marcus needed his father. And you gave him a business card and an office with a view and thought it was the same thing. Tears fell. Mine. Silent and unstoppable. Forgive him, Catherine said. Not today. Not all at once. But start. Because Victor stole 30 years from you through hatred. Do not let him steal your son through stubbornness. Her eyes flickered. The clarity dimming like a lamp turned low. She blinked, looked at me with fading recognition, smiled vaguely, pleasantly, the way she smiled at the nurses, at strangers. The window had closed. I sat beside her for another hour, holding her hand, letting her words settle into the foundation of everything that came next. 6 months later, the sale of Drummond Pierce Medical Technologies closed on a Tuesday in July, $212 million. The proceeds established the Catherine Drummond Foundation for Alzheimer's Research. Nadia chaired the medical advisory board while continuing her residency at Mass General. The foundation funded 14 research grants in its first quarter. Catherine's name on letterheads and laboratory doors across the country. I kept the Beacon Hill brownstone, filled it with Catherine's photographs, her journals, her music, made it a shrine to the woman who was still alive in a room across the city, but no longer knew my name. I visited her every day, read to her, played Debussy, held her hand. Some days she smiled at my voice. Most days she watched the birds. I stopped waiting for lucid moments, stopped hoping for recognition. Just being there was enough. Presence, Catherine had taught me, was the thing I had always undervalued. I would not make that mistake again. In August, I drove to Federal Correctional Institution at Fort Devens. Different facility from mine, medium security. I passed through visitor processing, sat at a bolted table, and waited. Marcus entered in khaki, prison uniform. He had lost weight, but looked healthier than the last time I had seen him. Clearer. Something settled in his face that had not been there before. The absence of pretense. He sat across from me. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Your mother told me to forgive you, I said finally. Marcus's eyes filled. Mom said that? In her way. Yes. Marcus looked at his hands. Flat on the table. Palms down. I do not deserve forgiveness. No. I agreed. You do not. Not yet. But you are still my son. And I was not the father you needed me to be. Victor filled a space that I left empty. That does not excuse what you did, but it explains it. And explanations are where forgiveness begins. Marcus's chin trembled. He pressed his lips together. Nodded. I will earn it, he said. However long it takes. I will earn it back. I know you will. I stood. Reached across the table. Placed my hand on top of his for 3 seconds. Brief. Firm. A beginning, rather than a resolution. Then I turned and walked out. The drive home took me past Sunrise Senior Living. I pulled in, parked, walked through the lobby, where Grace waved, entered Catherine's room where Debussy played softly and the afternoon sun painted rectangles of gold on the floor. Catherine sat by the window, watching birds. I sat beside her, took her hand, opened the book I had been reading to her, began where I had left off yesterday. She did not know my name, did not know the story, did not know that her words, 6 months ago, had rebuilt something I thought was permanently broken. But she held my hand. And when I read sometimes, in the quiet afternoons, she smiled at the sound of my voice. That was enough. That was everything. This is my story. And I am sharing it so you never have to live through yours. For 30 years, I believed I knew what friendship meant. I believed it meant shared history, shared meals, shared laughter across a table on a Thursday night when the work was done and the bourbon was good and the man across from you felt like a brother. I believed that time built trust, that decades of proximity created something unbreakable, that a man who stood beside you for 30 years could not possibly be standing there with a knife. I was wrong. And that wrongness cost me 730 days of my life. It cost 2 innocent people their lives entirely. It cost my son 25 years of poisoned thinking and 5 years behind bars. It cost my wife the final chapter of our story together. Blind trust is not loyalty. It is laziness. I say that without pride. I say it because I was guilty of it. For 30 years, I trusted Victor Pierce because trusting him was easy. Because questioning him would have required effort and discomfort and the possibility that the foundation of my professional life was built on sand. So I did not question. I did not examine. I walked on that ground every day and believed it would hold. Until the day it swallowed me whole. If you are listening to this, I ask you something. Look at the people closest to you. Not with suspicion, not with paranoia, but with honesty. Do you trust them because they have earned it? Day by day? Through consistent action and transparent character? Or do you trust them because it is comfortable? Because questioning would be inconvenient? Because it has simply been too long to start doubting now? Time does not build trust. Character builds trust. And character is not what a person shows you over dinner. It is what they do when you are not watching. When there is nothing to gain from kindness, when no one would ever know if they chose cruelty instead. I missed the signs with Victor. Not because they were invisible, but because I did not want to see them. There were moments across 30 years when something flickered behind his eyes, when his smile held a fraction too long, when his generosity toward my son felt less like affection and more like acquisition. I dismissed every one of those moments because the alternative, that my best friend was my enemy, was too painful to consider. Do not make my mistake. Pain now is cheaper than devastation later. But this story is not only about betrayal. It is about what remains when betrayal has taken everything it can reach. My daughter remained. Nadia, who spent 2 years building a case in secret, who sacrificed her peace, her sleep, her relationship with her brother, to fight for a father she believed was innocent, who turned a small apartment into a war room and a medical career into a weapon of justice. She did not do this because I asked. I never asked. She did it because that is who she is. Loyalty is not loud. It does not announce itself. It simply shows up, day after day, in silence, without recognition, until the moment it is needed. And then it is everything. My wife remained. Catherine, fading behind a disease that was stealing her from me one memory at a time, still found the clarity to give me what I needed most. Not evidence. Not strategy. Wisdom. Forgive Marcus. He was a boy who needed his father. You were not there enough. Those words changed me more than the verdict did. Because the verdict gave me justice. Catherine gave me truth. And truth is harder to receive than justice. Truth requires you to look at yourself without the comfortable story you have been telling. Truth asks what you contributed to your own destruction. Not through guilt, but through absence. Through choosing work over presence. Through building an empire, while your son built his loneliness. In my darkest nights behind those prison walls, I prayed. I asked God for strength when every part of me wanted to break. When the fluorescent lights buzzed and the concrete walls pressed close, and the injustice of it burned so hot I thought it would consume me. I asked God for strength, and God answered. Not with rescue, not with miracles, with patience, with the quiet voice that said, "Wait, wait. Your time is coming." When Catherine looked at me through the fog of her disease and spoke Victor's secret with perfect clarity, I felt God's hand in that moment. Not dramatic, not thunderous, just a window opening at exactly the right time, truth arriving through the most unexpected vessel. My wife, whose mind was failing her in every other way, given one moment of crystal lucidity to deliver the peace I needed most. That was not coincidence. That was grace. And when my daughter appeared in that Cambridge apartment, with 18 months of evidence assembled through courage and sacrifice and sleepless nights, I saw God's justice taking shape through human hands. Not divine intervention from above, but divine purpose, working through the people who loved me. Through Nadia's determination. Through Raymond's loyalty. Through Thomas's integrity. Through every person who chose truth when lies would have been easier. God did not remove me from that prison. God gave me the people who would. So this is what I know now. What I wish I had known 30 years ago. Friendship is not time served. It is character revealed. Do not confuse the two. Presence matters more than provision. Your children do not need your empire. They need you. In the room. Listening. Showing up. Every day. Without distraction. Without substitution. Because the space you leave empty will be filled by someone. And you cannot control who. Forgiveness is not absolution. It is release. When I began to forgive Marcus, I was not excusing what he did. I was refusing to let Victor's poison continue working through my family. Unforgiveness is the last weapon of the person who wronged you. Do not let them wield it from a prison cell. And finally, the deepest betrayal does not come from enemies. Enemies are visible, expected, prepared for. The deepest betrayal comes from the people you never thought to guard against. The people you let inside every wall, every defense, every vulnerability. That is why it cuts so deep. Not because the knife is sharp, because you never thought to wear armor in that direction. If this story reached you, if something in it touched a place you recognize, I am glad. Not because I wanted to share pain, but because I believe stories can be armor. The armor I did not have. The armor I hope you will wear. Take care of the people who show up for you in silence. They are your real wealth. Everything else, the companies, the bank accounts, the corner offices, and Italian suits, all of it can be taken. All of it will eventually fade. But the person who fights for you when fighting is hard and thankless and invisible, that person is everything. If this story resonated with you, I invite you to share your thoughts below. Tell me what you recognized, what you will do differently. If you believe stories like this matter, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it, someone who might be trusting blindly, someone who might not be showing up enough for the people who need them. And if you would like to hear more stories that carry weight and meaning, please subscribe to this channel. There is always more to tell. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening to an old man's hardest lesson. And please remember, the people who love you are showing you every day. Make sure you are watching.